everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. I'm so excited to dive in. We are here to talk about a really good topic, really relevant topic, and that's just how can we optimize our time and emotions? How can we remove negativity and reinforce the positive? We've got an incredible guest speaker with us today. We've got Jennifer Chapman. Jennifer is a stroke warrior, the founder of Just Commit Coaching, and director for Select Senior Care. Jennifer, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Garrett. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about how can we optimize our teams? How can we be better leaders, better professionals, better just more present at the office and just and overall just be in a better mood about work and about life in general. So I know I gave a brief overview of you, but do you mind maybe just introducing yourself a little bit further and just sharing with us and the audience a little bit more about who you are?
Sure, yeah, I love to. I am in Indianapolis, and after I graduated college, I spent 15 years in sales. So 10 of those years were actually in the adult beverage space, which was really fun. Had several different positions through the course of that tenure, and then was actually recruited on LinkedIn to take that next step. And that was kind of my first, um, you know, leap of faith, if you will, into like the corporate world and making, hitting that next level of the expectations and what, yeah, what to expect in corporate sales and the goals and the results that were needed and necessary every day and every week. And found success there in my first year and hit President's Club. So I knew what it meant to kind of be at the highest level and was looking to continue to do so. And then at 34, 4 years ago, I actually suffered a stroke that kind of turned my life completely around, obviously. And long story short, blessed physically, went through the rehab and recovery of that. Really struggled mentally and emotionally, and found myself hiring a life coach to kind of help me understand everything that kind of happened for me and the purpose behind it, and really kind of shifting my perspective and kind of my trajectory of what I wanted to do after that. So not only am I working with a locally owned and operated home health company, which has been great, but really paying it forward with my experience and the knowledge that I have and the experience I gained from my life coach to kind of help others out there.
So that's crazy. I mean, 34 years old, you have a stroke. That's, I would imagine, jarring. I mean, I've never really asked you this, but was it hereditary? Was this uh, stress induced? Like, how does that happen?
I can definitely say I was more stressed than I gave myself credit for at the time. They're definitely not going to define a stroke just as it was due to stress, but I definitely think it's always a factor. Um, no, nothing hereditary, no red flags. They did not even diagnose me with a stroke when I first went into the ER, actually. They wrote me off as vertigo. And it wasn't until the second neurologist came in that looked at the MRI and I had clotted in three places. So um, it didn't take them until 18 months later to figure out the why behind my stroke, which was a dissection in the artery in the back of my neck. So it was a fluke. And now that I'm so much more aware of it and the people that I've connected with these last 4 years, it happens every day to people in their 20s and 30s and 40s where they either have a tear in the front of the carotid artery or the vertebral artery in the back of their neck. So it happens all the time.
Wow,
You just don't know until you know somebody that it's happened to.
dang. So let's dive onto the emotional component of all of this because I know that I could imagine, I couldn't even imagine just what it would be like to have a stroke and to go through something like that. I mean, I'm not only physically is it a toll, but yeah, mentally, emotionally, I would imagine that took a lot out of you. And I would imagine you probably had this internal reckoning where you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, what do I really want to do? Life is potentially short. What gets me going? Like, what gets me excited about life and work and things? Was that kind of a process, a mental exercise that you went through?
100%. And it was at the year mark that I had my follow up with my neurologist, and I was this emotional disaster in her office, and I couldn't control it. And she's trying to figure out like, why are you crying? What's the deal? Get a grip. And I couldn't, and I didn't know why. So it was seeking out different solutions to try and get it under control, which was trying different medicines and therapy, which I tried, and it just didn't resonate with me. And so, and oh, by the way, I went back to my job, so I'm still trying to work at a high level every day. So it was, here I am going in and out of accounts trying to sell high level sales, and then I would get in my car and like cry at the end of the day, or cry in between calls, or cry when someone would call me, and I'm like, I can't figure this out, but I want to. And that's when it was a referral through one of my dear friends that said, you reach out to this life coach and see if this is something that's worth your while. And sure enough, it was.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think so often as professionals and as leaders, we think to ourselves, like, okay, cool. We separate like the emotional side from the work side. We show up, we put on our face, we do what we need to do. And then, if we've got emotions or anything like that outside of work, we take care of it on our own time. I'd be curious to know, why is it important to take a regular inventory of our emotions and how we're feeling?
Oh, it's critical. I was blessed with a very supportive leadership team that allowed me to kind of come back on my own pace and to allow me to continuously work on myself first, which with people that I've spoken with over the last couple of years, that's not always the case. And employers are not always the most supportive when someone's endured a life changing experience. So I'm thankful that I had those conversations with my leadership team, and they understood that, hey, if if doing Pilates at 4:30 every Tuesday and Thursday is what's going to make you feel better, leave work and go do your Pilates. Like whatever it's going to take for you to feel better mentally, emotionally, physically, to kind of come back and be your best the next morning, do it. So it was, work life balance is such a cliche phrase, but it is indeed understanding how much that life balance plays such an important role in your professional life.
That's interesting. So I love this. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is it's almost by having this stroke, it allowed you to feel comfortable with asking for specific things within work that maybe you weren't comfortable with asking for before. I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of people who would think to themselves, man, if I could do Pilates at 4:30, I would be so much more energized and charged for work. I mean, I know I personally meditate every single day. And I mean, a lot of professionals that think to themselves, like, you can't meditate during the middle of the day. We got work to do. How did you broach those conversations? How would you encourage other people to broach those conversations? Because I know for me, meditation works. Like after I eat lunch, I hit that food coma. I'm not nearly as mentally sharp as I am after a meditation. And so literally for me to take 25 minutes to meditate makes me significantly more productive for the rest of the day than if I don't meditate. I'm just not on my A game.
Right. I agree. And I do the same thing. And I think looking back in the corporate space that I was in, I would have others reach out to me. So they had a mentorship program at Cintas, and I was a mentor before the stroke, which I loved. And I found that after, as I'm still fulfilling this role, that was more fulfilling actually for me than selling an account for the week. So if I could have like a small group call, or I would schedule one-on-one calls with my mentees, my these team members, we would call and discuss life. They found that calling me, it wasn't necessarily like, oh Jennifer, how would you go about this account, or how would you go about this dealing with this buyer? It was, I am like really struggling right now. I'm emotionally feeling a little bit unstable. I'm just not happy. Like, and we would talk through that. And I think that allowing them that safety, that level of safety and comfort in a call like that, help them then step up after that or the next day, or saying, man, it's okay, I'm so glad I called her, I have this person to talk to. Yeah, I'm gonna take a step back this last hour of the day and regroup in the morning. So I am very thankful that Cintas allowed that open dialogue with our teams.
As leaders, what can we do to get a like tap into that information, tap into like the fact that that our people might be struggling, and just to be consciously aware of that? Because I think a lot of leaders, we don't know necessarily what's going on with every single one of our employees' lives and work. And so I think a lot of leaders are receptive and open to this idea of saying like, hey, if you need to take some time to go do Pilates or, have a conversation with another person on the team, whether that be a mentor relationship or otherwise, or just meditate or whatever you do to recharge yourself and get yourself into that right mental state. I think most leaders are open to that from their team members, but I think a lot of people are afraid and apprehensive to ask because they're afraid of what someone might say if by asking just in general like that. It might say, they might think to themselves, oh, it shows that I'm a slacker because I'm asking for this time for myself. How have you broached those conversations? How can leaders be consciously aware of that to create a safe space to ask these questions, and how can employees feel comfortable asking their leaders, their boss, their manager for that permission?
I think that approaching your direct leader and having those leaders, not only when they maybe have their like weekly one-on-one meetings and discuss professional goals, etc., but it's asking them like, how's life? Like, how are you? How was your weekend? How's family? How are things going? How are you feeling? Just asking those simple yet pivotal questions to kind of check the pulse of them and see how they're doing. And then offering, maybe they not feel overly comfortable talking to their direct boss, at least being open enough to say like, I'm not on my A game right now, or I'm about 8 out of 10, or this is kind of going on behind the scenes in my family life. But offering, having the resources, offer those resources to them, or saying like, hey, if you need to take it, take a half day, or take a couple of hours at the end of the day to handle what's going on here, they need to know that if they allow their teams to do that, that they're going to show up more fully, professionally, and ready
I,
to go.
I love the way that you said that, because I think a lot of leaders might be listening to this and say, "Oh, I go to my team all the time. I ask them how they're doing every single day, and yeah, I get pretty much the same answer all the time." But it's
Sure.
the way that you said, "How are you?" Like not how are you doing, but how are you? Really tell me what's going on with your world, and actually taking the time to care and hear
Right.
and be there for them. And I think that's a really critical component, because so often we're so in business focus, we're so like laser, this is what needs to get done, this is what needs to get done, this is what needs to get done. We lose track of the emotional side of the work and the business itself. But on that, I want to talk about something. I want to learn your perspective on this. I want to talk about gender conditioning and differences between the genders in the workplace and emotions. Because I just know a lot of men, as men, we grow up and we think, okay, we got to be big and strong. We don't talk about emotions. It's logical. We think and then we act. We don't necessarily feel and then we act. And so, therefore, we follow our logic and not necessarily our emotions. But we know that we're, as humans, emotional creatures. Things change, things are always constantly evolving. How can we overcome a lot of that just gender conditioning we've had growing up in the workplace, so then we can actually have deep, meaningful, intentional conversations about the emotions that we're feeling, whether that be outside of work or in work?
Such a great question. And I feel like you are speaking directly about my husband, who's who's very logical, not emotional, gets uncomfortable going there, but yet he's in a leadership position and has been so in the majority of his career, and has yet still built really solid relationships with his team. Um, and for me, I was surrounded by lots of male leadership, um, you know, members or teams that handled it really well. When I would come in, I know, most men probably would feel uncomfortable with a female coming in and showing their emotions, whether they, lost an account or had an ugly conversation with the buyer, etc. Um, so I think it's being able to find that connection, whether it's male or maybe it's another leader on a different team or within the organization, but finding that mentor, to know that you can go to if it's not your necessarily direct supervisor. But um, some males connect better with males, some females connect better with females, etc. But having that go-to person, maybe you don't want it to be your direct boss, and that's okay. But knowing you've got that outlet, to call when you need to kind of talk through something, as long as your direct boss still, respects you enough to know you're doing this, and you have to do what you have to do, to still excel professionally for them.
Well, I think there's power in leading at the top and leading by example. Especially if you're a leader, if you're a senior leader within your company and you've got direct reports and you're thinking about this lunch and learn that you're listening to right now, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, you know what? I love to create an environment where my team can feel emotionally connected with me. Let's say, as a leader, let's say this person is a man and he's thinking, yeah, I would love to have an emotionally connected environment. Maybe I think to myself, I'm not, I don't necessarily feel my emotions all the time or all these sorts of things. But I want to create that environment. I think leading at the top and leading by example is so critical. Having a level of vulnerability to actually share and
Oh,
show that it's okay, sharing those emotions of how you're feeling creates and actually shows by example that this is a safe place. Because just by saying, hey, we have this safe place for people to share their emotions, it's kind of like, I liken it to unlimited vacation days. When we say, hey, you've got unlimited vacation days, you can take vacation whenever you want to. The data shows people don't take any vacation days because there's no clear boundaries as to what is okay and what is not okay. And so when we don't have those boundaries of what is okay, what is not okay, especially when it comes to conveying emotions at work, we hold it in and we don't talk about it. We can't really leverage the power of understanding how other people are feeling unless we as the leader are taking action to actually show, okay, you know what? Here are areas that I'm struggling in, and here are things that I'm feeling right now. And these are the things that are going on in my world, and just showing that this is an opportunity for other people to share as well. What are your thoughts on that, Jennifer?
I love it. I love it. And I think what I appreciated a lot about, working for an organization like Cintas is, the male leader I had, the best sales manager I've ever had, would take the time to create like a team building activity, or create that environment where let's get out of the office for half a day and let's go, volunteer somewhere for a couple of hours and then grab lunch, and let's just talk about anything aside from work. Take out the work noise and create these safe spaces to, kind of that team bonding, if you will. And we would go around the circle and say, let's talk about your whys. What gets you up in the morning? What gets you going? Why do you want to be here? Why and bringing it back to that, which I loved at such a huge organization, that that culture was so strong with that regard, because we weren't always talking about, hey, what's the best sale you had this week? Oh, what's this or that with regards to work. So it was separating that and be able to create this safe team environment and team building activities that really made us all feel stronger and more connected, and building that trust within us.
So I want to go beyond just the, hey, it's great, it's important to talk about emotions. I want to talk about the nuts and bolts. I think if I'm like a financially oriented senior leader and I think, okay, if I'm a bean counter right now, why does it make sense financially, performance wise, team wise, for us to talk about emotions at work? Why is it important to focus on optimizing our time and emotions together in one? Why does that even make sense from a business efficiency standpoint?
Your emotions can control whether you want them to or not, how you're going to perform. I feel like, so if you're not emotionally in a strong space, how do you feel comfortable and confident enough to go out to give these big presentations, um, when you're not at your best? And emotions, I mean, emotions, they can affect every facet of what you do. And male leadership would be lying if they said it didn't to them too. Life happens, and it's just a matter of how you handle it. So just because somebody's not going to handle it exactly like you do, you need to understand, because if you can get your team emotionally, at a high level, like that's going to make them perform and do everything else that you want them to do at a high level, if you take in consideration their emotional well-being.
You know, one thing I know that you and I have talked about outside of this is just the power of and the differences between focusing on the negative versus the positive and how that kind of manifests itself and really how that impacts performance because there are always different lenses and angles we can always take at a given certain scenario or situation. Why, and I know this may sound like a silly question, but why, how can we how can we remove that negativity and focus on the positive and move things forward from a positive lens while still being realistic?
Right. I think it's practicing that, like having trainings on it. So when you doing like mock role plays and you hear them use that negative language, it's immediately then noticing it and coaching them on how to reframe that.
Mm.
Um, saying, oh, I can't sell that account because of this or that. And then immediately being able to reframe it then and saying, oh, but you can, and here's how. Or I don't want to go to that account. I don't want to do this. And it's shifting it in that, in doing those weekly trainings and seeing it on the spot, or then going with them on an appointment and being able to coach them, you know, before or after that appointment. But it's just that consistency of, you know, of continuously training and reframing, writing down potentially like the top 10 negative thoughts or words or sayings, and coaching them then like how do we reframe this, and then writing it down and then utilizing that in their day-to-day routines, in their day-to-day conversations.
Let's say I'm a professional and I recognize how important it is to be positive, how important it is to remove the negativity and negative language and words that stifle innovation and just stifle energy and progress moving forward. But I noticed that my boss, my immediate manager, really struggles with it. For whatever reason, they use a lot of negative language and it has an impact on morale, even if they don't necessarily, even if we're hitting our numbers, it still impacts morale. How can I manage up? How can I have this conversation with my immediate boss or supervisor to let them know or try to reframe their way of thinking, but in a respectful way? Because, I don't want to come in and step on their toes and tell them that the way that they're doing things is bad. But at the same time, I know that their negativity weighs on me. And when their negativity weighs on me, it diminishes my performance. And I would like to be the best possible self I could possibly be at work.
Such a great question, because I know it can be intimidating. um, and I feel like I went from like a really great sales manager to one that um, wasn't at that same level. So to be honest, it was just asking if they're open to feedback, and acknowledging that and kind of showing them that respect and just saying, here's some feedback and thoughts I've gathered from the team, and maybe taking that leadership role within the team, which I honestly did. And because of that, my leader was then like very thankful and saw the positive response from the team and how they were responding to me. And then she started to kind of shift that and seeing, oh, they're they're hearing her and respecting and listening to her. I need to check myself, and I mean, it's definitely, it can be a tender, you know, subject and fine line, but you've got to be strong enough to know and just do it in a respectful way and asking for permission to do so.
I
You
love
can,
that. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
it can be done.
Yeah, I love the suggestion you have of asking for permission to give that guidance and support because I think that's really the most critical component of it. I think when somebody comes up and just says, "Hey, this is what I think you should be doing," or "Hey, this is an area that I think you're struggling in or not as strong in," that immediately puts up everybody's defensiveness red flags. Everybody's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, let me put up my armor here." Jeez. Um,
Right.
but that when you say, "Hey, would you be all right if I offered a suggestion or offered a piece of advice?" That mentally primes somebody for something that they're going to hear that they're not going to want to hear. And that at least lets them know, okay, they're not doing this out of malice. They're doing this because they want to see me thrive, succeed, and be their best selves. So I think that's a really, really strong way of handling a scenario like that, where we have maybe a boss that's not as positive and not necessarily maybe just being as that fine balance between realistic but opportunistic in terms of creating uh,
Yeah,
the right mentalities for teams. So,
I agree.
Jennifer, this has been a really good lunch and learn. I feel like we've discussed some really interesting
Mm,
topics just around how can we optimize our time and our emotions together so that we can have the most ideal work environment for ourselves, and just ultimately we can be our best selves at work, but create an environment where the other people feel comfortable sharing, opening up, and being vulnerable as well, because we know that if they can, we can have not only greater retention and greater just engagement metrics and productivity, which those are natural byproducts of a team being happier, supported, and just more emotionally connected at work. That oxytocin's flowing. But really, more importantly, we just create a better work environment for other people to come and work in. Um, so, with that said, how can our audience learn more about you? How can our audience learn more about your work, the things that you're doing, books, podcasts, LinkedIn? How can they connect with you?
yeah, thanks for asking. And I've really appreciated this conversation. And I, as we all know, mental and emotional health isn't going anywhere. But if we can improve it within um, a strong work environment, your team's only going to excel. And the thing, everybody's going through something, and a lot of times you just can't see it physically. So um, yeah, to offer as much support and tools and resources within a professional environment is only going to excel and see that team thrive moving forward. So, if anybody wants to connect with me, I would love that. I offer complimentary clarity calls if anybody's interested in even just wanting to have that intro conversation with me. Justcommitcoaching.com is my website, or if they just want to email me at jennifer@justcommitcoaching. Would love to connect with them on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and Instagram at justcommitcoaching.
That's awesome. Um, This has been great. This has been great. I love that example you kind of just gave of providing as many resources as you possibly can, because you never know, because what is not necessarily what something you are not necessarily facing is not necessarily something that other people are facing. I know I'm putting it weirdly. Maybe to give an example, it makes me think of The Office, the American TV show, when Dwight
Love
is
it.
in charge of taking care of the medical insurance providers, and he thinks that people are putting in fake illnesses and ailments because he's never dealt with them before. And I think somebody put in like on their notes like anal fissures, and he's like, okay, everybody, we need to stop joking around here. I need real ailments. Like, who could possibly put on anal fissures? And Kevin, who's a guy in the office, he's like, somebody has this issue.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
hilarious.
the point is I joke about it. It's a very funny scene, but the reason why I bring it up is that just because you as a leader are not necessarily feeling some of these emotional or mental health issues or challenges does not necessarily mean your team isn't, and doesn't mean that you should be ignorant
Right.
or unaware of these challenges that are going on with your team.
Yeah, I think consistent check in with your team and just having genuine, authentic conversations will take you so much further than, hey, what'd you sell this week? What's your number this week? Did you hit your goal this week? Like that's just asking for burnout.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Jennifer, thanks for being here. This was amazing. Everybody, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you, everybody.